Cocoa Beach is your ultimate Florida beach vacation. Pack your bags and open your mind. Adventure is calling from Orlando's closest beach. Cocoa Beach is Florida's secret gem that's got it all. It's the budget-friendly, retro-cool destination that families and surfers adore. Come soak up the sun and ride the East Coast's most famous waves. Start planning your one-of-a-kind getaway now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
Hello and welcome to History for Weirdos.
We're your hosts, Andrew
and Stephanie.
And each week, we're going to take you on a journey into the strange, obscure, and relentlessly entertaining corners of human history.
Now listen up, friends, because it's about to get weird. It's been a couple of weeks, but we are back with episode 93.
What's going on, weirdos? I am back from the brink of death and here to bring you some epic History for Weirdos content.
Yeah, we have missed you all. For those of us who don't follow us on Instagram, you may not have heard because that's where we provided the update. But not only did we have to miss an episode 2 weeks ago for Quinceañera in Mexico, we had to miss last week because Andrew got sick while traveling from the Quinceañera.
I know. Wow, it was bad, guys. But I'm all better, 100%, and
Yes.
and ready to go. I'm not going to bore you or disgust you, more likely, with the details, but just know that I was in severe pain.
Oh, yeah. It takes a lot for Andrew to take time off of anything, let alone the podcast, which we love so much. But I'm so glad that you were able to rest and that we are back. And this is a nice little reminder. If you don't follow us on Instagram, I do recommend you follow us at History for Weirdos, because if there is like a special episode or we have questions or there's a delay, that's where we will provide the update.
Right, exactly. And thank you for that plug. That was a good one.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and also to kick things off, happy 4th of July to all of our American friends.
Yeah.
It's coming. I know that the episode is dropping on July 3rd, but it's the next day. So happy 4th of July. And we'd like to actually make a little announcement. So for the month of July, we will be doing something called Summerween.
Yay.
And Stephanie, actually, do you want to go into it, the details of that?
Yes, I did not come up with the term Summerween. I just want to clarify. I've heard this term on YouTube. And essentially we're going to be adding some spooky elements, some of the darker spooky elements to our July episodes to give us kind of like a fun summer meets Halloween vibe for the month of July.
Exactly. And I'm really excited about that. And to kick off this month,
kick off Summerween.
Summerween, yes, thank you. To kick off Summerween, we're going to be looking at an incident within the Soviet Union. So we're going back to the 20th century. So not like my normal, ancient history. What was it?
Stuff.
I know I sounded so articulate there. No, I was trying to say
Your
like
specialty.
Bronze Age collapse, or just antiquity. Yeah, no. So we're going to the 20th century, and this is one of the stranger just episodes of, I feel like, human history that I've ever seen, and especially something that we have covered on this show.
Oh, interesting. I'm excited to hear.
Yes. This is an incident that, again, like I said, took place during the Soviet Union during like kind of the height of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
But it not only shocked the nation, but pretty much the entire world.
Okay.
Yes. So a group of university students went hiking in the Ural Mountains in what should have been an epic 2-week or roughly 15-day trek across 200 miles or 320 kilometers of snowy peaks and high winds.
Ooh, that
Yes.
sounds intense.
It sounds very intense. But these students, sadly, were never to return.
Oh.
It was a tragedy, undoubtedly, but the circumstances around their deaths have been spoken about now for the past 64 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Today we'll be discussing the Dyatlov Pass incident, or the tragedy at Dyatlov Pass, that happened during the night/early morning of February 1st and 2nd, respectively.
Of what year?
1959.
1959. Okay. Wow.
Yes.
I'm intrigued.
And before we get into the incident, let's get a bit into what the Soviet Union was like at this time. So Joseph Stalin, you've probably heard that name before.
Yeah.
He was the once leader of the Soviet Union, and he had been dead now for over 5 years at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a brutal dictator who became paranoid towards the end of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Stalin thought that everyone was a political enemy and either directly or indirectly was responsible for the imprisonment, torture, and deaths of millions of people during his rule.
Yeah.
Not a nice dude.
Mm-mm.
So this guy, I mean, this was a guy who even threw his own son into prison.
Right.
Yeah, the gulag, as it was
Mm-hmm.
known. And, I mean, this just terrible, psychotic person is now dead.
Mm-hmm.
And his successor, a guy by the name of Nikita Khrushchev,
Yeah.
basically was like, he tried to position himself as like the anti-Stalin.
That's smart because
Yes.
people must have been living in so much fear.
Yeah, he was known as like kind of a reformer, like at least the beginning of his kind of rule. He was still a dictator. Don't get
Right.
me wrong. He was still a dictator, but he actively sought to quote unquote de-Stalinize the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Yeah, so he did this by releasing political prisoners and by introducing certain economic reforms.
Okay.
And the effect of all this was a sort of, rebirth / revival in the Soviet Union, which, included them being the first nation to send a satellite into space in 1957.
Yeah.
This sort of optimism certainly had an effect on one of the main protagonists in our story.
Okay.
So let's right now we have entering Igor Dyatlov.
Okay.
He was an engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in his hometown, a city named Sverdlovsk, or now Yekaterinburg. There's a lot of Russian names in here, so I'm probably going to butcher at least one of them, if not more.
All of them.
Yeah,
Oh.
Wow. Stephanie has zero confidence in me. Oh my God. Oh boy. Anyways, he was quite the cross-country skier and an adventurer, as he had already led a number of arduous wilderness trips, often using outdoor equipment that he invented or improved upon. I mean, this guy, he's a kid. He's like in his early 20s at this
Yeah.
point. So, I mean, the fact that he was probably a late teenager or even just a regular teenager when he was doing his first like expeditions.
That's insane to think about.
It is,
To have that kind of drive as a young adult
right?
to just get out there and explore.
Exactly. It's kind of nuts. So he submitted his proposal of this now infamous trip to the Institute's sports club, which enthusiastically approved the plan.
Okay.
So Dyatlov gathered an additional 7 men and 2 women, all of whom were experienced trekkers and were university students. So their names are, and I'm just going to read their names once, just because out of respect.
Of course. Yeah.
So we have Yuri Doroshenko, Lyudmila Dubinina. God, that was I butchered that one, and I'm sorry.
It's okay. You're going to give your best effort.
Yeah. Georgy or Yuri Krishnevenko, Alexander Koletov, Zenaida Kolomogrova, Rustem Solobinin, Nikolai Thibault Briganole, Semyon Zolotaryov, and Yuri Yudin. So one of these men, Zolotaryov, was actually 38 and was previously certified to go with another expedition of similar difficulty. So I need to amend my earlier statement just saying that they're all university students. He was the lone exception.
Okay.
Yeah, he's kind of like the oddball in the group. Everyone else is like in their like kind of like early, maybe mid-20s at the latest, and this dude's 38.
Okay. But he seems to be seasoned in doing these kinds of expeditions then.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
He was slated to go on a previous trip, but then was kind of just like thrown onto this one.
Okay.
So the route in which they were to take was designed by Dyatlov's group to reach the far northern regions of the Sverdlovsk Oblast and the upper streams of the Lozva River.
Is there, and I'm sorry if this is a silly question, but with the expeditions, is there like an objective or a goal or something that they're trying to see or map, or it's just sort of like to explore these areas?
No, that's a really good question. So from my understanding is, I mean, one, I know that Russia is absolutely, from a land mass perspective, is absolutely massive, right?
Huge.
Gigantic. Yes. So I think there's and a lot of it's very remote and just, I mean, barren. Right where they're going is it's not a populated region at all. There is an indigenous tribe that actually lives there, but they've been, quote unquote, Russified over centuries. So they're called the Mansi people, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But besides them, there's not really too many people there. So it just hasn't been traversed.
Okay.
So they're almost like, you can think of them as like kind of like cartographers in a way.
Yeah.
Just mapping the region.
Just figuring out what's there, how to get there, how to get back.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the route that they were going to take was designed by them, and their ultimate goal was to reach the Otorten Mountain, just a few miles away from what would be their final campsite, sadly enough. So on January 23rd, 1959, the Dyatlov group was issued their route book, and they left their city of Sverdlovsk by train that very same day. So several of them even hid under seats to avoid buying tickets.
Oh my gosh, that's such a college student move.
I know, it really is. I laughed. I'm like, that's something I would do.
Yes.
So they were in high spirits, so high that on a layover between trains, one of the group members was briefly detained by police for playing his mandolin and pretending to panhandle in the train station.
So they're goofing off. They're mainly college kids kind of on a fun adventure.
Exactly.
And they're having a good time on the way there.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, that's a really good way of putting it. So, and we know these details because the group had a communal journey and would fill in, quite a bit of detailed information for us, later on.
Do you mean communal journal?
Yeah, what did I say?
Journey.
Oh, yeah, communal journal. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. What an interesting idea to have a journal where multiple people are putting in entries.
I know. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. My friends and I had something similar in elementary school.
Oh, nerd.
Yeah. We would everyone would get it for like a weekday or something. And we'd share our thoughts and stuff that way. But we were not going on expeditions. We were just going to Roosevelt Elementary School.
200-mile trek through the Ural Mountains.
No, but we were traversing 5th grade.
Oh, okay. So just as difficult.
Just as difficult.
The group, so they eventually made it to the town of Ivdel 2 days later. So I guess this would be on the 25th.
Okay.
And from here, they had to travel by bus. They also travel in the back of a woodcutter's truck, and then by ski-driven, horse-drawn sled.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, they're getting to the remote areas here.
Wow.
Yes.
Planes, trains, and automobiles, but like trains, trucks, horses.
Yeah. Sleds.
Oh my gosh.
So on January 27th, one of the students, Yuri Yudin, he had a flare-up of sciatica.
Ouch.
And fortunately for him, he had to turn back the very next day, on the 28th, which saved his life.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And that must have been, in the moment, really frustrating and disappointing to walk away. Exactly,
because only days later, everyone's dead.
Yeah, but I mean, you're hiking, you're trekking.
Right.
Sciatica would be terrible. It would exacerbate it so much. It's the pain in your sciatic nerve, which goes up and down your leg.
Yes. Oh my God.
That would be terrible. But, oh, that's so spooky to think.
It really is. It truly is.
Okay, so Yuri's the one that turns back, you said?
Yeah, he's the one who turns back. So the plan was to end up at the tiny village of Vizhai around February 12th. Mm-hmm. Once the expedition got there, they would telegram to the sports club to let them know that they had arrived safely. Mm-hmm. But as you can probably surmise at this point, that telegram would never come.
Yeah.
There had been an intense snowstorm around the time, like immediately preceding the 12th. So when there wasn't a telegram at first, no one was super worried.
Yeah, because they're thinking, oh, it's a delay.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until a week later, on the 20th, that the families of the hikers started to demand that there be some sort of rescue, because already they're 8 days overdue.
Wow, that's a long time. They let a lot of time pass.
A lot of time, especially since we know that it was well documented that they actually like, what the event in question happened on either the 1st or the 2nd.
Oh, wow.
So we're already weeks after.
Okay.
So the local police, along with the army, using airplanes and helicopters, began to assist with the search and rescue operation.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until almost another week, on February 26th, that their final campsite was found near Kholat, the Siakal mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And fun fact, the literal translation of this in the local native language Mansi is Dead Mountain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So the local indigenous people know something about that mountain.
They know something. Yeah. The tent was partly collapsed and somewhat buried in snow.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhat. And that's important.
Okay.
And this is just where things just start to get weird. And honestly, everyone, like, it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder the more we get into it.
That's kind of perfect for a podcast called History for Weirdos, I will say.
I know.
This is what the people want.
Yeah. How fortuitous, right?
Yeah, how fortuitous. So tell us, why does it get weirder?
So the rescuer who found the tent that they were using described it by saying the tent was like half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind.
Their shoes?
Their shoes had been left behind. It looked like the tent had been cut open from the inside. And later on, that would be confirmed.
What?
It was cut open from the inside. And besides that, everything looked ordinary. The skiers' boots, axes, and other equipment were even arranged neatly on either side of the door of the tent.
Like, okay, we're setting it up for tomorrow when we leave.
Exactly.
Here's where all our stuff is. But it got cut from the inside, and then their shoes remain. You're not going to go far without shoes in the snow.
No, exactly. Food was laid out as if it was about to be eaten, and there was a stack of wood for heating a stove and clothes, the cameras, and journals.
Oh.
Or at least one camera, I should say. 9 sets of footprints left by people wearing only socks or possibly a single shoe or even barefoot could be followed, leading down to the edge of a nearby wood on the opposite side of the pass. So roughly a mile or a little over a kilometer and a half, like to the northeast of the campsite.
All 9?
All 9, yes.
Okay. This is very strange.
These footprints indicated a walk and not a run, and it didn't indicate any sort of like anyone being dragged or anything like that.
Everyone seems to be independently walking, not running.
Exactly. No one's getting dragged or anything like that.
Interesting.
The following morning, so the search and rescue team found the first 2 bodies under a tall cedar tree at the edge of the forest. They were lying next to the remains of a fire, wearing only their underwear.
What?
I'm telling you, it only gets weirder. The 12 to 15 feet up the tree, there were some recently broken branches, and on the trunk, bits of skin and torn clothes were found.
Skin?
Yeah, so indicating that they were trying to climb up.
Uh-huh.
But again, like in just their underwear.
Okay.
And bits of clothes. Later the same day, the bodies of Dyatlov and another student were also found, but further up the slope with their fists tightly clenched. Interesting. They were facing the tent and looked like they were heading maybe back towards it.
Okay.
While the search went on for the other travelers, an autopsy was conducted on, the 4 bodies that had already been found. And again, it just gets weirder, and this is also slightly graphic, so if you're squeamish, maybe, fast forward about 30 seconds.
Okay.
One of the bodies that was found near the tree had, this was, Kirivoshenko. They had blackened fingers and 3rd-degree burns on his shin and a foot.
Okay.
3rd-degree burns. That's incredibly hot.
Yeah.
Inside his mouth, there was also a chunk of flesh that he had bitten off of his right hand.
What?
The other quote-unquote tree student, Doroshenko, had burned hair on one side of his head, and he also had a charred sock.
Okay.
All 4 of the bodies were covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, and cuts. And a 5th body, that of Slobodin, was discovered a few days later near to where Dyatlov was found on the slope.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's 5 bodies found. And he was also covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, but he also had a minor fracture in his skull. Scientists determined that that wasn't his cause of death, but still thought that was pretty strange.
There's some sort of scuffle, some sort of, the burn, some sort of attack almost.
We'll get to that, yeah. It gets, again, and we do find all of them, so
Okay.
all the bodies, and the other ones are honestly even stranger.
Do we know cause of death?
So yeah, the cause of death for all 5 that have been officially found so far, or I guess officially has been hypothermia.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I should note that the 3 travelers on the slope were all found only between either 1,000 to 2,000 feet away from the tree where the others were found.
Okay, so far they're all in fairly close proximity.
Fairly close proximity to the tent, but all away from the tent.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were all found close to each other, but far enough away where it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense. So very quickly, a homicide investigation was opened because this is just weird.
Mm-hmm.
During this time, toxicology tests were done, witness testimony was taken, diagrams and maps made of the scene, evidence gathered and forensically analyzed. The tent and its contents were helicoptered out of the mountains and set up inside a police station. And this is where we actually have confirmation that it was cut from the inside, because a seamstress who just happened to be doing unrelated work at that police station saw it and was like, oh yeah, that was open from the inside, not from the outside.
Wow.
Like, she could tell definitively.
Right.
Ultimately, though, the investigation didn't really go anywhere because it's just truly baffling.
Right. And it's 1959.
Exactly.
Even though it sounds like they're really trying to do their best to figure this out, the forensics just wouldn't be advanced enough. I think there's no DNA testing or anything to see whose DNA is on what.
Right. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And any attempt now would be really tough because of
time and the remains and all of those things.
Exactly. Yeah. Just I guess natural degradation.
So far we know they're in the tent. They cut the tent from the inside.
All 9 leave calmly.
We don't know if they're calmly, but they're walking.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
They're
walking away
without shoes on.
Yeah, or at best one pair of shoes, like a single shoe.
Okay.
So it's weird that it seemed to be that they were in a hurry, but not enough a hurry to actually run.
Because if you're cutting the tent open, I'm thinking someone's freaking out, something happened.
Right.
So you'd think you'd be running away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or running towards help or running whatever. But no, I'm just going to walk now that why not unzip the tent?
Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange.
Okay. Keep telling us things.
Cocoa Beach is your ultimate Florida beach vacation. Pack your bags and open your mind. Adventure is calling from Orlando's closest beach. Cocoa Beach is Florida's secret gem that's got it all. It's the budget-friendly, retro-cool destination that families and surfers adore. Come soak up the sun and ride the East Coast's most famous waves. Start planning your one-of-a-kind getaway now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
New on CuriosityStream. How do you connect a 16th century potato to limitless energy production? Could Napoleon's toothpick have a direct link to a machine that predicts the future? And how can a 1700s conch shell chart a course to humans connecting their brains to the internet? James Burke's visionary series Connections returns for a new generation. Experience all new Connections. With monthly, annual, and bundled plans, find the one that works for you at curiositystream.com.
Something had happened that induced the skiers to cut their way out of this tent, flee into the night, into howling blizzard in 20 below zero temperatures and bare feet or socks at best.
Oh,
That's
my
the
gosh.
situation that we're in.
Even for Russians, that's cold.
That's yes. And again, this group was very experienced, so they would have known the consequences of leaving a tent ill prepared in the heart of winter.
Right. These are all, I would say, like amateur explorers, right? They're wilderness people. Seems more like it would happen to maybe first timers that freak out about something.
Exactly.
People more inexperienced.
Exactly.
This is really odd.
It is. It's very strange, and also I didn't put this in my notes, but we know that they were like level 2 out of 3, and like after this trip, they would have gotten their like highest level certification. Like they would have been level 3 trekkers.
Is that a thing? Like here in the U.S.?
I don't think so. I mean, who knows? Actually, it seemed like it was a Soviet thing.
Yeah.
Specifically, like a Soviet, like as in like not Russia, but just like the Soviet Union. But yeah, I have no idea. Honestly, no idea.
Because I know there are, obviously that's a big culture is hiking and wilderness exploration here as well. So Weirdos, if there are levels to your outdoorsiness, please let us know on Instagram.
I would like to know that too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So out of the 3 levels, they're level 2. They've done this before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They've done this. They're in it. So it would take another 2+ months to find the remaining 4 bodies, by the way.
Oh.
So after the snow and ice had begun to thaw in early May, a Mansi hunter and his dog came across the remains of a like makeshift snow den in the woods, 250 feet from the cedar tree where the 2 bodies were found.
Really?
Only 250 feet away.
Oh my
from them.
gosh.
Like a floor of branches laid in a deep hole in the snow with pieces of tattered clothing strewn about, black cotton sweatpants with the right leg cut off, and the left half of a woman's sweater.
That's another thing that's so odd is that everything seems to be very haphazardly, like cut, burned, tattered.
Yes, it's really strange.
Nothing seems consistent with each other.
Yeah, exactly. Excavation around like the area uncovered the 4 remaining victims lying together in a rocky stream bed under at least 10 feet of snow. And to make matters even stranger, their autopsy revealed catastrophic injuries to 3 of them.
Oh my God.
So these were the 3 of the entire group whose cause of death, like officially, was not hypothermia.
Okay.
So one of their skulls, that of Tybalt Brignoles, was so badly fractured that pieces of bone had been driven into his brain.
Oh, wow. 2
of the others, Zolotaryov and Dubinina, had crushed chests with multiple broken ribs, with one of them, Dubinina, containing a massive hemorrhage in the right ventricle of her heart.
Oh my gosh, these poor people.
The medical examiner said the damage was similar to what is typically seen as the result of an automobile moving at high speeds.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's a direct quote. Even though that none of them had any sort of puncture wounds whatsoever. And to top it all off, Zolotaryov's corpse was missing its eyes, and Dubinina's was missing its eyes, tongue, and part of the upper lip.
What?
I'm telling you, it literally just gets weirder and weirder the deeper you dive into this. And again, to make matters even stranger, the deceased were wearing articles of clothing that had been taken or even cut from others in the group.
No.
Yes.
They're not wearing their own clothes.
Right. And just like tatters of like other clothes.
Oh my gosh.
And these clothes, some of them had unusually high levels of radiation.
Oh.
So
that's very interesting.
And to give some context, their bodies had been exposed to running water for months now, so the levels on the night of the incident would have been much higher.
Okay.
And it's already pretty high.
Yeah.
So I've thrown a lot at you and to you weirdos. So here's just a very, very quick snapshot of some of the facts that we have mentioned so far. So 6 of the group members died of hypothermia, 3 of them to fatal catastrophic injuries. And those 3 were so severe that they could not have been caused by human hands. They were too strong. There were no indications of any other people on Kholat Syakhl apart from the 9 travelers. The tent had been ripped open from within. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. I didn't mention that earlier, but yeah, that is also true. Traces from the camp showed that all group members left the campsite of their own accord on foot. And of course, the unusually high levels of radiation.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's not nice to think this, but it would feel like it makes more sense if there was obvious evidence of like an outside person.
Right.
You know, another set of footprints or even an animal or something. It's still tragic. These poor people didn't deserve this, but the fact that it just seems like they were going about their business, all things as planned, and then
something went really wrong.
Yeah, it almost seems like just from the really like amateur thought that came to mind is like a weird mass hysteria.
There's this movie from like the late 90s. It was like a sci-fi movie called The Event Horizon. And like basically, I'm not going to get into the story, but like there's a scene where you kind of like, you're kind of getting towards like the apex of the movie, the plot. And you see like the moment that they kind of, it takes place in outer space where you kind of like, they go into an alternative dimension and it's just like pure chaos. And I'm like, that's the sort of vibe that I'm getting from this.
All of a sudden, just actual chaos like kind of erupted from this group.
Exactly. Just in a moment, it was just like utter pure terror and chaos.
That's awful.
So on May 28th, 1959, Lev Ivanov, he was the prosecutor and lead investigator, closed the case as it was only his job to determine if a crime had been committed. And not necessarily, it wasn't like to look and try to figure out what had happened. And clearly this wasn't any ordinary crime, right? This is just something that is so insanely weird.
Beyond his scope.
Exactly. He had determined, that again, like no crime had been committed, but also noted, quote, "It should be concluded that the cause of the hikers' demise was an overwhelming force which they were not able to overcome," end quote. And that for decades was the official cause of death, was like an overwhelming force.
That's really spooky.
Yeah.
But that definitely speaks to what you were alluding to, this like force of chaos, or like a mass hysteria sort of thing. Kind of like I've told you about the phenomenon that we don't really understand called folie à deux, madness of two in psychology, where two people will share sort of a psychotic break.
Whoa. And
they share delusions. I don't know actually a ton, if I could look into it maybe for a future episode, if this can happen amongst groups, but that's what it sounds like. Almost like they all kind of lost it at the same time, wandered off, and things deteriorated from there.
We'll get into like pretty shortly here, like
theories,
okay, causes.
Because I'm sure so many people have probably studied this over and over again.
I mean, people have been studying this since it happened, basically, for decades now. Like there have been so many theories that have been floated. It's actually kind of wild.
Tell us more.
We'll get there. So obviously the families of the hikers were incredibly dissatisfied and tried in vain to get like further investigations what had happened. They even appealed to Khrushchev himself.
Oh, wow.
But nothing was ever done. The investigative files, photographs, and journals were classified, and the area around Dead Mountain was placed off limits to skiers and outdoor enthusiasts for years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The area of the mountain that the trekkers were trying to reach but never did was renamed Dyatlov Pass. So it's a little bit of a misnomer that the actual Dyatlov Pass was not the site where they were killed.
Okay.
It was like their end destination.
Right.
So now we get into the area of what the hell actually happened on the night/early morning of February 1st and 2nd. So for decades, the story faded into obscurity until 1990, when Ivanov published an article in which he claimed that he'd been pressured not to include his views on what had actually happened that fateful night.
Oh my goodness.
The article, titled "The Enigma of the Fireballs," said that the skiers had been killed by heat rays or balls of fire associated with UFOs.
What?
I can't make this up.
Balls of fire? I guess things were scorched on them.
Right. I mean, it's not the worst explanation.
And the force
Yes.
quote, yeah, okay.
In his original examination of the scene, Ivanov had found trees with unusual burn marks, which, quote, confirmed that some kind of heat ray, say, or a powerful force whose nature is completely unknown, to us at least, acted selectively on specific objects, end quote. And interestingly, the last photo in the camera that belonged to one of the trekkers showed flares and streaks of light against a black background.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So not the worst theory. And surprisingly, in Russia, a similar, although, different take on the theory has taken root over, the past 30 years or so.
Okay.
So that is that the skiers died because they had stumbled into into an area where secret weapons were being tested.
Yeah. That's another thing that crossed my mind when you mentioned that the families, understandably outraged, were demanding more information, and the government's just like, no, that's all we got.
Yeah.
That crossed my mind too.
Exactly. So the idea that a missile launch of some kind went disastrously wrong, inflicting severe injuries on some of the skiers and forcing the group to flee their tent, at which point they either froze to death or were killed by military observers.
Okay. That kind of makes sense too, but it wouldn't explain them walking.
Exactly, and how there were no other footprints found.
Yeah.
That's very hard to do. And I will say this is the view that Yuri Yudin, the guy who left the trip early, he held all the way up until his death, which happened in 2013.
Really?
Yeah.
So he agreed with theory number 2, that it was a missile?
Yeah, or some sort of missile launch or something.
Okay.
Went disastrously wrong. Dubinina, he said, may have had her tongue cut out by the killers because she was the most outspoken of the group. And there is some evidence to back this up, right? People in the region did say that they had seen flashes of light or moving balls of fire in the direction of the mountains.
Okay.
And in 2008, a 3-foot-long piece of metal was found in the area, which apparently belonged to a Soviet-era ballistic missile. And this would explain some of the radiation that they found.
Yes, that's true.
Even Yevgeny Okishev, he was Ivanov's superior in the prosecutor general's office. He gave an interview to a newspaper in 2013 in which he recalled finding it suspicious when he and his colleagues were instructed to test recovered items for radiation.
Yeah.
When he pressed his superiors about it, they just told him to tell the victims, like the families, that their deaths were accidental and to close the case.
Oh my gosh, that's such an infuriating answer.
Incredibly infuriating. But again, this theory doesn't line up with the snow prints found, right?
Yeah,
Mentioned
exactly.
that. And if there were military personnel there, their tracks would have been all over.
All over the place, yeah.
And it wasn't.
Probably like vehicles would have been there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, in fact, there was no evidence that anyone besides the travelers were there.
Right.
And also, why stage such an elaborate and bizarre scene?
Why not, if the military were there, you could say like, oh, they cleaned up their tracks or whatever. Why not clean up the
Everything.
remains?
Yeah, clean up the remains, just get
The
rid
tent,
of everything.
yeah.
It wouldn't make any sense. And then just all the bodies all over the place, partly climbing up the trees.
Yeah.
Even having skin on the trees, very strange.
Right.
Very strange. It just honestly doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, with the massive declassification of documents after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was never any sort of mention about any sort of military or secret intelligence base in the area.
Yeah, and that is the type of information that would have come out.
It definitely would have come out. And there's been so many people that have been interested in this case for years and decades that have looked at these documents, and not a single shred of evidence supports this.
Oof.
Yeah. So there's also, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's a theory in Russia that's popular that the CIA was involved, but it even makes less sense.
Yeah.
For example, why meet in this absurdly obscured location, and to what end? Right? There's very little to gain from this and just a lot to lose.
Yeah, why target, or if not target, harm these college students, right? Say they're not your target, you were there doing something else shady, but then you come across these college students in their tent. It doesn't explain anything. Again, the CIA especially would really clean up their tracks. They would not want to make it seem like anything happened there. Or they'd try to make the deaths look more natural.
Exactly. I mean, this
looks very unnatural.
Exactly. Very unnatural. It's very strange. It's very strange.
Are those the main theories, or is there more?
No, there is more. There's a lot more.
Tell me.
So other theories range from practical and unimaginative to absolutely absurd and everything in between.
Perfect.
So in July 2020, so this is only like a few years ago, the official explanation had been updated to say that it was an avalanche that caused the death, all these deaths, specifically a slab avalanche. But this is deeply problematic as there is no evidence of an avalanche actually even occurring.
I was going to say, then you would have seen an avalanche.
Right.
When you got there.
And the tent wasn't even completely covered.
Yeah, you mentioned partially covered.
It was partially covered. An avalanche would have also left certain patterns and debris distributed over a wide area, and that the bodies were found nearer to the tent barely had any snow covering them.
Yeah.
They were found pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
Plus, over 100 expeditions to the area that have occurred since have never uncovered any conditions that would cause an avalanche.
Ooh.
So over 100, not a single one.
That sounds like BS then.
Yeah. One of the more interesting and plausible scenarios could have been the result of a natural phenomenon called katabatic winds, or katabatic.
Okay.
And this is really interesting. It's when cooler, denser air moves down a slope and can create somewhat violent and hostile conditions. So specifically the fast-flowing funnels of air propelled by the force of gravity transported snow like down the mountain to the campsite, like could have caused some sort of panic and disorientation. And on top of that, these type of winds have the effect sometimes of causing infrasound, which can create panic attacks in some people.
Oh, okay. So that could explain what drove them out of the tent and into the snowy woods.
Exactly. They could have caused like a mass hysteria.
Yeah.
Because it's like the super high frequency that you can barely hear. It just makes you go nuts.
Yeah, and you're just like, what's going on? I got to get out of here, get away.
Exactly.
Okay, but it wouldn't explain their injuries.
Wouldn't explain their injuries. It wouldn't... these winds are very, very fast and have killed people in the past, but it's still not the rate at which, especially the ones that had catastrophic injuries, not them.
I doubt that the wind takes out your tongue and your eyeballs.
Exactly.
Or burns your hair.
Or gives you radiation.
Yeah.
Exactly. And because it doesn't. Again, yeah. I literally put in my notes, like, this does not account for the radiation nor the placement of the bodies and why clothing was swapped.
Yes, I forgot about that detail.
There's so
oddly
many details.
Yeah, that's so oddly spooky to me.
And, here we're just getting kind of like deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, but like other theories include like either paradoxical undressing caused by hypothermia and or carbon monoxide poisoning, which could have caused hallucinations. But my absolute favorite theory is, and are you ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
A Yeti.
Okay.
And not the cooler, but like the abominable snowman.
But wouldn't the Yeti leave tracks and footprints?
That's a very good argument, babe. And he definitely would.
Or she.
No, I don't know why I said he. Probably it is a better way of saying it. And, this theory actually does come from a picture taken. It was one of the last pictures found on the aforementioned camera.
Really?
And and again, remember, this is 1959, so it's not like we have 4K.
Exactly, yeah. I assume it's a black and white camera too.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it looks like you have in the tree line, there was like a hunched figure.
Okay.
Again, not exactly plausible, but it's my favorite theory, so I wanted to mention it nonetheless.
Did you look up these images when you were researching?
No, I haven't. So I was actually going to, after we did this episode and
see if we can post them.
Exactly. And from here, we get into even crazier theories like aliens and other supernatural phenomenon.
You already mentioned aliens. Aliens was theory number 1, right?
No, it wasn't.
An alien attack?
No, I haven't mentioned aliens
UFOs?
Oh, yes. The dude, whatever his name is, Ivanov.
Uh-huh.
There we go. Okay, so you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, not to gaslight you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that kind of sort of morphed into more of like the plausible like missiles scenario.
Yeah, because I guess, and I make this error all the time. We forget that UFO just means unidentified
Right.
flying object. It doesn't necessarily mean aliens. I
Correct.
just assumed that it was aliens
Yes.
when you said UFO.
Exactly. But, this case is officially closed and officially, right? I'm doing officially with like
Right.
air quotes. Their death was caused by an avalanche.
What?
Again, however, the facts don't back that assertion up
That's
at all, really.
Yeah, that's so frustrating. That seems like the least likely.
Yeah. So, Stephanie and my dear weirdos, what do you think happened this fateful night?
I really resonate with the theory that there's some sort of poisoning, that they experienced some sort of toxic, I don't know, material, something they inhaled, something they were exposed to that led to them behaving in a very odd way.
Right.
But what makes me hesitant to fully go with that, or what I feel like still isn't answered, is it does seem like the government or other forces would have just said that if it was something innocuous, like, oh yeah, I guess they came across poison water or something.
Right. And it doesn't account for radiation.
Yeah.
Like,
I think there's something missing, something that's being covered up.
absolutely. And that's, I think, the prevailing thought in like Russia is that like there was definitely some sort of cover up.
And how frustrating, because obviously they were living in a time where, I mean, so many can relate to this, but I'm sure they had very little faith and trust in their government and in their...
I think more so then than like now. But yeah, like I think this definitely probably shook. And they were sort of going through like that revival that I mentioned.
Yeah, where there was like this kind of optimism and things
Yeah.
are getting better, but this must have been very heartbreaking to get stonewalled when
Exactly.
asking very reasonable questions.
I mean, and even like fairly high up people when asking like, hey, like,
Why am I testing
why am I
for
doing
this?
this? And they're like, nope, shut it down. Just make this go away. That's also weird.
And very concerning.
Incredibly concerning.
What is your assumption?
I think it's a mix of a few things. But
Yeah, that's likely.
that's the only thing, because like there's no one thing that can explain everything, right? Like, I mean, there is some sort of mass hysteria,
Yeah.
probably caused by a toxin, right? That is, I think, happened.
To me, it sounds like them leaving the tent, they were confused.
Right, and
But why?
I don't know why, because
Yeah.
and also why did that one guy have third-degree burns and another
Exactly.
one had like hair completely like singed off the side of his head,
Exactly.
and then radiation on top of that? Like, so that means some sort of like minor nuclear explosion. I don't know, but no, but then that wouldn't make any sense because like there was no damage.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Right.
there'd be traces of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nuclear explosion. There'd be massive traces of that. No idea. Maybe some sort of radiation poisoning to boot. That
It could be radiation poisoning, yeah. But again,
like, but where would that come from?
and why the group that was found buried in kind of like the little snowy area,
Right.
their injuries are so
So strange.
strange and so different.
I know when you start to think, oh, maybe it's this. There's like half a dozen like pieces of evidence that like, nope.
Which, to your point, likely means that it's a combination of bizarre factors.
I think so. I mean, goodness, I mean, I would just like what I would give to just be
Oh,
like
yeah.
not a fly, but like something just like in a little like observant, like,
To just know, to
Yeah.
have footage somehow, or to have like the objective truth.
I know.
That's why cases like this like drive people nuts, because there's no way to actually know for certain as
Right.
of now with our current technology, because the only people who know that we know of are the deceased.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
But yeah, that's the story of Dyatlov Pass.
Wow, Andrew. This was weird,
Very weird.
even for our podcast.
I think so too.
Fascinating, horrifying, definitely quite a kickoff to Summerween.
I think so too. I know. Some big shoes to fill with stuff.
Yeah, I really do. And of course, even though, time has passed. I just feel so sad for these people and for their families. What a
I know.
terrible and frustrating and unjust way to end things.
I genuinely couldn't agree more.
And to be denied the most basic thing, which is answers.
Right. Just answers. That's like all the family wanted is like what happened to them.
Yeah.
And they never got it.
That's so sad. But wow, what a cool story. I can't wait to hear what the weirdos think.
Yeah,
what their
weirdos.
theories are.
On the Instagram post for this week's episode, let us know what you guys think. I'm very curious.
Yes, please let us know. Again, follow us on Instagram at History for Weirdos. Comment your thoughts. And just stay tuned for Summerween because it's about to get weird.
It's about to get weird. Before I forget, I need to let you guys know my sources for this week.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the information actually comes from this fascinating, very long article from the New Yorker.
Okay.
They did a great job covering this. That was a really good one. I also got information from the New York Times, History.com, the Smithsonian, and, of course, our favorite, Wikipedia.
Yeah, I'm sure there's so many fascinating sources out there.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when you look up this incident, there are a lot of articles from like 2000 or 2021 like come out or like that came out like roughly around all the same time. Like, did science finally solve the mystery at Dyatlov Pass? And the answer is no.
Great.
Yeah, no. That's if you want a one-word answer to that question, it's no.
Who knows though? Maybe at some point we will be able to. Technology advances so wildly.
Right.
Who knows?
Exactly. I would love to hopefully, have an answer.
Like to be alive if they find.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, weirdos, thank you so much for listening to another episode of History for Weirdos. It is so good to be back. And do not forget, if you like this show, please rate, review, subscribe, or just send this episode over to someone who you think might enjoy it. That helps the podcast grow. And we appreciate you all so much because you've helped us grow, and we love, 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 love this weirdo community.
Yeah, we got you. I mean, we love you. You guys are awesome, and thank you so much for having this happen.
Yeah, thanks for listening to our voices.
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
We love being in your home and in your ears.
In your ears.
Not to be creepy or anything.
Until next time, weirdos.
Adios.
Cocoa Beach is your ultimate Florida beach vacation. Pack your bags and open your mind. Adventure is calling from Orlando's closest beach. Cocoa Beach is Florida's secret gem that's got it all. It's the budget-friendly, retro-cool destination that families and surfers adore. Come soak up the sun and ride the East Coast's most famous waves. Start planning your one-of-a-kind getaway now at visitspacecoast.com. That's visitspacecoast.com.
For the best TV viewing experience, witness the coziest maroons, the most vibrant and brightest moons, the eeriest and darkest tombs, and radiant and vivid hues in any type of room with the Neo QLED and OLED TVs by Samsung. We're supposed to say Samsung, but that didn't rhyme, so you're welcome. Samsung, more wow than ever.